Hi guys, welcome back to another episode of T.N.T. Garage and Performance, and today we're back on the checkered. I was going to do another thing, and then I decided not to. So instead, we're going to work on getting the motor locked in. Now, when I put the body back on the chassis, I kind of got it set in on a motor plate, but we're going to go in, measure, get the trans hooked to the back, make sure the engine's square in the frame, it's angled properly in the frame, and measure for a drive shaft. So, let's get to it. Well, first things first, I really don't want to pull the whole front end off, so I'll just take the hood off. Right. It's not completely attached to the grill, which it is, because why wouldn't it be? There. Yeah. Nice thing about old rusty cars like this, you don't really have to worry about scratching anything. I'd rather not dent it, but okay. Well, before I get too carried away, I'm going to bring in here and show you kind of what I need to do first before I locate the engine, because I want to make sure my plates are going to work and everything like that. So let's get you brought in. Now, as you can see, I've just got the engine and stuff just kind of laid in here. The head's sitting on top, and the reason why the head's not on this empty block is because the plug on the front of the head for the coolant passage hits the back of the motor plate. Now, there's a couple things I can do. I can cut a hole in it, which would work to get the head on and then to bolt the motor plate to it. But say if I had an issue and I needed to take the head off, I wouldn't be able to take the head off without pulling the front motor plate. With an aluminum head or something like that, that's going to be smooth. I really don't want to grind this down, so we're just going to trim the motor plate, and there'll be plenty of aluminum there. Be significantly structurally solid, so we don't have to worry about that. And then in the back, I kind of want to push this motor further in to the back of the car, so I may have to trim a little bit on that corner there where the heater hoses poke out, and maybe a little bit on this side, but we'll see. So let's dig into it. First thing I'm going to do is grab the transmission and bolt it to the back of the bell housing and see if our factory cross member for the checker is anywhere close. This is going to be the fun part. Get these. Probably should take this rearmost heater core out of the car, but we'll just put those somewhere to where when I'm right in the middle of something, they'll drop down and slap me in the face. All right. Get the emergency brake cramp out of the way so that doesn't hit me in the balls. Wrench, bolt, 4-speed. Let's see just how much fun this is to get up into the car. Try to use my noodle here on what's going to work the best. Because I don't have the room to slide out of the car, put it on my chest, and then get it up in get it over my hip. Get myself a little more room here. Oh, there we go. Oh yeah. And of course, where are my bolts? I pushed them with the creeper, didn't I? It's always, you got something heavy on your chest. Oh, there they are. There's two of them. That's all I need for now. Oh, this is starting to get heavy. Okay, up and in. This would be a lot easier if my creeper didn't move. This is exactly why I hate creepers, because not only does it roll away, my shirt's caught underneath it. I might have to get off the creeper because this is really going to piss me off. I need one of them good creepers with the encapsulated, something in my eye there, with the encapsulated wheels. Because have you ever had the back of your elbow pinched by one of these? They fly pretty far when you throw them out of the garage. All right. To hell with the creeper. I'm also going to clean up this pilot here on both the trans and the bell housing, get it to slip. It's supposed to be a tight fit, but get it to slip a little better. Also, safety glasses, because I don't like stuff falling in my eyes. Let's try this again, and now I won't roll across the floor when I'm really trying to jam this in. I probably should take a second and tighten this bell housing up. She ain't gonna go anywhere. Ugh. Yep. Oh. Stay. There. Tony Angelo ain't the only one that can bench press a transmission in a car. I mean, I'm sure G-Force is a little heavier, but got some competition in Wisconsin, buddy. Of course, I'll probably be in the ICU after this. I just need to see how much room I can get out of this to slide this engine back. It looks like I can get a good 1.5 to 2 inches further back on this side without the cylinder head hitting anything. I might have to trim my mid plate a little bit, but it looks doable. So transmission is up and in, and we'll get this pushed back probably with some trimming, and then we can work on getting it square in between the frame rails. So let me wiggle out from under here and kind of do some contemplating up top. All right, what we're looking at here, in order to get it further back on both sides, this old panel here that would hold the forward body mount has got to go on both sides. It's not as much of a problem on this side because it can only go so far back anyway. I'll have to trim the plate a little bit, maybe get rid of that area there and build a gusset that comes out and over so we keep the strength. But the other side definitely needs to be cut out and then trim the mid plate. So I'm going to grab the death wheel and we're going to just zip that off on this side and on the other side. Well, I'm sure you remember that I said I wasn't wanting to pull the front end off, but one thing I have to do, I needed to get this all out of the way because I actually want to beat the firewall in a little bit under the heater core here so I don't have to make as big of a cut on my mid plate. So we're just going to have at her. Of course, make it nice and smooth. I think that should be far enough back. It didn't take much. So now I'm going to get the steering column out of the way completely so I don't have to worry about that. I could trim that hole a little bigger and we can continue on. All right, now the steering column's out of the way, which, by the way, nothing better than to put a car together with self-tapping Phillips head screws because bolts would be dumb. So, much like a lot of things on these cars, I had to remove it with a grinder. So, let's get this swung back in, see where the mid plate lands, and then we can go ahead and trim this to get it back where we want it. All right, so we're going to start on the passenger side trimming our motor plate here. And it looks like if I just do an angle from here to here, that should give me the clearance I need on this side. And then on the other side, I'm going to trim some away. I might have to honestly add some back because I jumped the gun when I cut the hole over there, but we'll see how it plays out. But first things first, let's get that buzzed off there. There we go. That ought to clear back so I can get a couple inches out of this side. And now let's look at the other side and just see how screwed we are. All right. I really don't want to beat in the firewall on this side because one, this is where my feet go, and two, the throttle pedal is also mounted right here. So if I suppose if I brought it right about there, we could plate it and make it strong. And of course, this isn't going to be the side taking a load anyway. It's just going to have, you know, just going to be tying it down to keep it from lifting. So we might be all right trimming pretty good out of this one. So let's start with our initial mark right there. I'm going to grab a tape measure and just see how far down we got to cut it. We're probably just going to have to angle it right to this hole, which I wouldn't imagine would take too much strength out of it, and we can always kind of add metal here. So yeah, let's well, I think that might work. Now, a smart man would have not cut that square hole first, but only one of two of those qualifiers are true of my previous statement. I'm a man. I ain't that smart. But, there. Got a little bit of clearance over there. And I did move it a little bit further back than my original marks, and we'll see just how far back that is. Yeah, so we moved it 1.5 inches further back, which I think is pretty good because it'll give me room for a distributor back here, and you know, the carbs. Another thing I'm looking at is with a tunnel ram on it, I want the carbs to clear this cowl. I really don't want to cut it up. I'm all right with bending it a little, but that's about as far back as I want to go with the engine. So now the big thing is we're gonna measure it, get it square in the frame, and then we're gonna find the angle of where this is sitting. We may have to trim some more off of the forward motor plate to get it angled down, but we'll cross that bridge in a second. All right, now that we got kind of everything squared away, one thing I wanted to check is the angle of the engine. So, given that the car is not at its final stance, it's close. It's pretty much going to sit like this between the extra weight on the front end with the motor down and running a smaller rear tire than what's on it right now. I'm going to set the engine angle determined by the chassis as it sits right now, because it's going to be really, really close to the overall angle of the chassis. So I'm going to take this, clean any schmutz off the bottom. We're going to zero it out, and then we're going to compare it to what the engine is. And there's a flat spot in here. We're at about 3.6, which the trans told me the same thing. Measure at the rear china wall. Right at about 3.5. So it varies on what kind of angle you're going to run. Some guys run a lesser angle, really tuck the ass end of the transmission up into the car. But this is pretty good. I got the trans as close to the floor pan as I want. The drive shaft has plenty of air room around it. And I'll show you another way to kind of let you know just how close you are. So just give me a sec. I'm going to get that chain out of the way. All right, another way to check to see where you're at on your angle as well is by slapping the intake on. I'm going to get this old cork gasket out of the way. That way our measurement isn't skewed. But if you set an intake on the motor, get it squared up on the china wall, and you take your angle finder, which will just reestablish 0, and you set it on the intake, she's just 2/10 off of what it just said on the chassis, because anytime you're installing an engine, the carburetor should be level as you can get them. That way you're not running into issues having to have a really low float level in the rear bowl of the carb. And that, you know, obviously you run into fueling issues there, but we are almost level on the carb flange, which means our engine is exactly at the angle I want it to be. It's about 3.5 degrees at the output shaft of the transmission, and the flattest spot I could find on rear differential is somewhere around 4 degrees, but we can fix that because you want parallel angles with your pinion and your output shaft. You don't want one to be up or down or the other. You want them to be parallel. But we can address that later. Right now it's just getting the engine in. So the next thing to do is go underneath with a tape measure and make sure the trans is centered in the frame as well as the center line of the engine. So I'm going to crawl underneath, measure that up, kind of see where we're at, and then we're going to move the engine to get it dead parallel, or at least straight in the car. The frame actually flares out, so we have to have it equidistant from each side. So let's grab a tape measure and get this thing sitting where it should be, and then we can make up our brackets. All right, after a long and tedious process, we got the drivetrain centered in the frame. So the center line of the crank and the center line of the output shaft are equal distances from each frame rail. So we know it's straight. Now it's time to start building our tabs that bolt the engine plate into the frame. So I'm going to go ahead and use this 3/16 steel plate that I will make my mounts out of, and I'm going to notch them a little bit so they kind of capture the frame rail as well. So being single shear, I kind of want it to sit up on here and then bolt to the motor plate. So I'm going to make a handful of these that are basically the same, both for the motor plate and the mid plate, and that way we can get them set in, drill some holes, and then buzz them in. So let's make some measurements, get the bandsaw set up, and then we can go from there. Oh, it's like watching paint dry, but we'll get those cut all even, and then we can notch them and get ready to tack them in. All right, well, we got our tabs made up, and they're going to sit on the frame like that. So I'm going to do a little grinding, and I'm actually going to weld in the mid plate because there's no reason for it to ever come out. This will always have some sort of Chevy power in it, and just easier welded in. It's steel. Yeah, of course, to pull the whole drivetrain out, you have to drop the trans separately, but just is what it is. So we're going to clean this up and buzz a couple brackets in. Just going to tack it to the frame here because I know the engine needs to be tipped up a little bit. So I'm going to make a tack just to make sure it stays put, but we'll still move a little bit. There we go. And now I can do my bracket on the front of the frame and drill a hole through to locate this side as well, because the engine actually needs to tip this way. So I'll put it in, drill a hole, put one bolt in, and it should be able to do that. Now you're probably asking yourself, why such a small bolt? It's not the final bolt. I actually, I don't have any half-inch grade 8 stuff here. I don't have really any half-inch bolts at all. And the local hardware store closed at 3 o'clock. So that really helped me out. So I just wanted to get a properly sized hole to the same bolt just so there's no wiggle room when I'm moving this around to get it level in the chassis. So that's why that's there. I'll come back through, I'll punch the half-inch bolts through it, 2 bolts for each side of the front plate. But for now, that'll hold it in place so it can't go anywhere. Now the next thing is to level this motor out. The driver's side of the engine needs to come up just a tick. So we're gonna measure across the frame and get an angle and then match the engine to that angle. And then we can go ahead, get this tab in, get it sitting on its mount, and then we can weld in the back part of the mid plate. And I got a straight bar here, and we've got it zeroed out. So now we'll put it on top of here, and we're about 1/2 degree angled down. So just a little bit out of the jack. That's got to be close. There we go. Finally, on 0. So, get the bar out of the way. Now we can go ahead and get this bracket over here in. Well, I made an executive decision. Like I was saying before, that the driver's side cylinder head actually interferes with the motor plate because of the plug that's threaded into the front of the head. So I looked at the other head, and the plug was in there deep enough that I just decided to take the flat wheel and get it smooth with the face of the head. A couple reasons for that is probably never going to have to take that out, and if you do, you can still get it out. But it also makes it so I don't have to cut anything away from here, and I'll show you why I don't want to do that just yet in a second. But first, I'm going to heave this heavy ass head onto the motor, get the other one on there, and start checking everything else. So this is going to be fun, especially with the master there. So let's see if we can heave this big boy up in there. Come on. There. She clears the motor plate. Now I also cleaned some of the flashing off the front of the head, so we know that that won't be an issue. We'll put a safety bolt in here, just in case if the head wants to get wonky, it won't fall off. That way it doesn't want to go anywhere. I'm going to throw the passenger side head on. And it looks like we're definitely going to have to get rid of the brake booster, which I planned on anyway. I want to do mechanical brakes, or yeah, non-assisted brakes, just for this reason. Because as you can see, the valve spring, I could barely fit my finger between the valve spring and the booster, which means tall valve covers, none of that's going to fit. So the booster is going to go away, just have manual brakes. If you ever want to work out, deal with a big block and cast iron heads. Now, I could put aluminum heads on this, but these are 781 castings. They're one of the better oval port, one of 2 of the best oval ports you can get. So, we're going to use them. Find your dowel. Stay. There we go. Clearly, that won't be the final intake. We're going to run a Y-end high ram, which will be probably that tall. We'll just barely have the carburetor sticking through the hood. Well, we got the big block securely in. Everything's straight. It's not going to go anywhere. So now I'm actually glad that I didn't pull the motor out and send it to the machine shop so I could finish this up. I, of course, got to drill the 1/2-inch holes, get 2 bolts per side in there. The rear looks good. There's just a touch of clearance here. I'm going to clean this edge up. And then on the other side, you can see that there's just a touch of clearance. I might have to grind the mid plate down a little bit to just clear the body, but it's just barely touching. Now, what I was talking about with the steering and why I didn't want to cut this part of the front plate away is, let me grab my steering box. I got a steal of a deal on this. This is a Borgeson Vega box I picked up at Summit in their garage sale section, and it's going to be mounted about there to where the end of the box, the input shaft of the steering shaft, is going to come through the motor plate. So putting a hole in there, I don't want to really compromise the integrity of the motor plate too much, because it's essentially going to sit about there through the motor plate, and of course be mounted up on the frame to where the steering will clear and everything. But that's why I didn't want to cut any more of that front plate away. But big blocks in, the 4-speed is hanging off the back, which will dive underneath. Oh, God, I hate crawling on the ground. So I need to get rid of them hoses. 4-speed is up in there, which is nice. It's solid, it's centered. The factory drive shaft is of course too short, and now it's real easy to make the measurement from my output shaft to the yoke, get a new drive shaft on the way. And while I'm under here, I don't think there's anything else to think of, but I did slide this drive shaft in there to check for clearance to the U-joint. Of course, the body is not in its final position, but there's plenty of room around the U-joint. I can get my whole hand around the yoke, so we're not going to run into issues in the floor, along with the drive shaft hoop, which I'll enlarge in the bottom of it. But all in all, it's looking pretty good. I think we'll have a pretty good shifter placement, which would be right about here in the car. So yeah, I still have to do the rocker, and the floors. So it's a mess in there, but the shifter will be right about there, which would be a pretty good position for it. But, some of these projects take a lot longer than you originally think, just when you get into it and you want to get it perfect. So it's in there, and there's just, like I was saying, there's no clearance for a valve cover. So we're going to go manual brakes and call it that. But there's a big block and a checker. Well, that's good. Pretty much got it wrapped up. I need to throw the front clip back on just because it's easier to store everything. So let's see far along on the struggle bus I can get putting this on by myself. I had my dad help me last time, so this ought to be much less fun. I did a smart guy thing. I've got the front of it on a creeper, but this is going to take all of my back to lift it and pivot it up on. So, let's do it. Oh, this is gonna suck a lot. Well, maybe if I slide it forward and get it around the wheels, or yeah, she ain't gonna go that far, so I'm gonna have to lift it. Pick the creep out. Yeah. Oh, that feels good on the hands. I'm gonna put my welding gloves on and at least mitigate some of the pain. All right. It's hard on the flies. It's hard on the flies. Oh, see, that wasn't as bad as I thought it was going to be. Oh. Whew. Yeah, that was unfun, but when we get the floorboards done and get the body mounted, we can actually work on making this front end tilt, which will be a lot nicer than picking it up, because she's old American steel. That's solid. So I'm going to throw the grill back on it. We'll take one look under the hood before we throw the hood on it, and get this thing stuffed back in the corner and get cleaned up. I don't feel like digging after the bolts, so we're just gonna do this the roadkill way. All right. This car is so ugly, I love it. But once we get a tunnel ram on there, she'll really make the look. And, you know, it's probably the only checker out there with a straight front axle with a motor plate mounted big block Chevy and a Borg Warner Super T.N.T behind it. Yeah, I like the look of a big block under the hood of this car. It actually looks a lot more substantial than I thought it would in this big of a car. So let's get the hood back on, get stuff cleaned up, wrap up this video. Yeah. You know, oddly enough, this hood is actually a lot lighter than the hood for my 87 Camaro. I think that'd be the case, but believe you me, it certainly is. Because I just had to move that Camaro hood out back, so it was not fun. Here we go. We started with it in one piece-ish, and we're finishing it up in one piece. I just can't wait to get the fender well headers in here, which I should get those soon, to make sure they'll clear everything like steering shaft and all that, and continue this mock-up process before I finally get around to sending the engine off to the machine shop. Figured I'd point this out too. Like I said in a previous video, I've done more fabricating, you know, stuff that you've already seen once, but this side is about complete. I just need to finish up that lower lip. I only had to fabricate that one panel, and I think it came out pretty dang good, if I say so myself. It looks like almost a factory fit panel, but we got the wheel arch in. Just need to nip and tuck that back side and get that bottom done, and we can go ahead and finish welding this, which is going to be pretty much a whole day where I sit down with the welder and then just go through this entire car, finish weld it. That way, you know, we just work our way around, get everything done, and don't warp anything. But it looks pretty good. Just need some nice wheels and tires. Figured I'd give you guys an update as well on the garage project that I mentioned at the beginning of the year. If you guys remember, I had all kinds of crap up against that back wall. Well, I moved all that out and basically made way, because this wall's going to go away, and save for the shelves and my stereo that I'll move up there, everything's ready to go. And I'll show you guys kind of what's going on in the back, as well as where all my stuff went. I had to get pretty creative. So as you can tell by the massive pile of dirt that we're getting somewhere, I had to move the Camaro off of this pad. That's on my car trailer out back. Got the camper put out back, my other trailer over there, so I kind of got stuff spread around everywhere. But this right here is going to be the new addition to the garage, with a taller roof, and pretty much come all the way out to my patio doors. And this is 20 feet, which will be super nice. I don't have to move cars around anymore to work on them. I'll actually have a dedicated shop with a kick out here where all my tools, toolboxes, and everything can go, and kind of keep it off the shop floor. So that's going to be awesome, and I can't wait to get it put up and be able to work in it. Now, you might wonder where all that crap went, and luckily I have a little garden shed out back along with the shelves that were there. So this is how to cram 10 pounds of stuff into a 5-pound bag. Of course, we got lawn and order sitting in here. Got my Harley sitting in here because there just ain't room in a garage. But I've got this shelf just packed with like TPI stuff, valve covers. We got front accessories, balancers, pulleys, camshafts, rods and pistons, more valve covers, other front accessories, headers. There's some headers there. We got 3 small block Chevys here, 305 short block, 350 short block, a Vortec Bear block. We got an NV 3500, a 545 RFE Chrysler Trans, 2 different sets of heads, the fuel tank out of the checker. It is just packed in here, and I hope I never have to move it out again unless I'm going to build one of these, but they all need machining to get anywhere. Maybe I'll build an engine with the parts I have, just kind of see how cheap we can build it here. But yeah, she's a tight fit, so let's go ahead and wrap this video up. I think I've been talking enough. Well, that does it for this video. I mean, the nice thing about the garage construction is I cleaned it out enough I could actually fit my truck in here, which a lifted Ram on 35s doesn't sit that much taller than my gasser here. Of course, it's up on dolly, so it's a couple inches higher, but I guess you'll have that. And I'm going to store the Challenger elsewhere so it's covered and safe, because God forbid during the construction process something happens to the car while in a garage, because I'd probably just be madder than fish grease. So that being said, I'm really glad I got the motor plates mounted and done, so I won't be afraid to blow this all apart and not have to go through all of the work to get everything set up again. And that leads me to something else. When you're doing a big project like this, one big thing that could happen is burnout with a project. And I was honestly having that, doing so much sheet metal work on this car that I was gonna do the rockers on it. I cut the steel out and everything, and right in the middle of it, I literally just ran out of f***s to give about doing any more sheet metal work for the time being. So moving on to this project and picking a small project out of the overall big project and completing it will help you kind of combat burnout. This way that's done, I'll probably feel a little bit better about taking flat steel and making it shapes it shouldn't be when I go to do the rockers and the floors. And once that's done, that's a huge step in this project, and it'll actually start going together a lot quicker. I've been procrastinating on it because, well, hand bending sheet metal frankly sucks, but it's part of the process when you're working on something that they don't make any parts for. So hopefully you enjoyed this. There's some information in there, and obviously, you know, like I said, with this whole project, I'm learning on the fly. I kind of learn as I go, making sure that even if I make mistakes, it's still quality work in the end. So now you can find this entire project in the playlist I've created that's up in that corner, I believe. And you can go ahead and check it out and see the progress I've made on this car from the time I bought it to now. And of course, you can watch any other playlist, any of the projects, the Challenger, this truck, the camper, brute farce. There's a couple other things in there. And well, of course, you can find all that right here on YouTube at T.N.T. Garage and Performance. And you can also find me on Facebook at T.N.T. Garage and Performance, and on Instagram at T.N.T. Garage and Performance. So go ahead, like, share, subscribe, comment down below, and well, as always, remember, if it ain't broke, fix it till it is. We'll see you soon.